Alright, I'm going to do a walkthrough of my show this year. This is 2019/2020. Front of my yard, I've got these incandescent red and white mini trees, I call them, and they're just 2-channel. They're controlled by the little SSR in this box right here, which I'll get to in a second. Up in the front here, I have one of my P5 panel matrices. This is a 2x6, 2 wide by 6 tall. A little donation box at the top for wounded warriors. This is a picture of the back, and you can see how it's all connected. I just have all the positive and negative running into that bus bar right there, and then I've got the daisy chain, and then all the data's coming in on the left hand side here as seen from the back. And inside the controller box, I've got the Beagle Bone with the Octo Scroller cape on it. And I've got just a 5 volt 15 amp power supply in here powering it all. So I'm powering the Beagle Bone and all 12 of the panels from a 15 amp power supply. And again, I only run my brightness at about maybe 30%, 40%, and so that works out great. There's one of my RGB floods, which I'll get to in a second. Here in the front, I've got some strip PEX arches. I'm using the 2812s, 5 volt, individually addressable pixels. Each arch has 64 pixels in it, and those are all run from a port from my Megatree, which I'll get to as well. So I went on eBay and Amazon and bought these cheaper floodlights. These are normally remote controlled. They're RGB. This one's Lofttech. I think I got the 4-pack for about, I don't know, 130 bucks, something like that. And then I just rewired them off of these little DMX controllers. You can buy those online for 10 to 12 bucks. So that's in line with my DMX protocol with all the stuff that I do DMX. Inside that front box, which I mentioned for the mini trees, is a DMX SSR 16. This is a board that, as you can see, is from 2009. It's pretty old, but it does my AC stuff really well. It's a DMX protocol, and I use it to control all my on-off incandescent stuff, and it also controls some relays, which I'll get to in a second. I have some what I call medium trees. These are a little bit taller. They're about 4 feet tall, and again, they're red and white, and there are 8 of those. And then I have these things called shooter poles. This is my shooter pole. This is a 8-segment red and white, so a total of 16 channels. And they're just C9s, regular C9 incandescents, and I've got them wired into another one of those DMX SSRs. Pretty straightforward. I've got another Megatree here, or excuse me, another pole here. I've got another pole over there, and I got a final pole over on that side of my yard. And they're all again run off those controllers. Here's the Megatree I built this year. This thing is 200 pixels tall. And the way I wired it was, last year I had it at every other pixel, so 2-inch spacing, or excuse me, every other hole on the Buscoil strip. And this year I decided to fill that in, so I'm doing a zigzag up and down per strip. So I go up on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, all the way up to the 200th, and then I come back on 199 all the way back down to 1. And that required a custom map in X-Lights, which was pretty simple to do. It just doesn't give you the shape of a Megatree, it just shows you a square. These are 5 volt pixels, so I inject power at every 50. So you can see at that point right there, pretty much all the way across, those are injection points. And then at the very top are injection points as well, and then at the very bottom. This whole Megatree is 3,600 pixels. It's 18 strings of 200. And it's run off 2 682s and 2 5-volt power supplies. So I've got in the first box here, this is the power injection for the first 8 strings, and then this is the power injection for the last 10, I think, or it might be backwards, 10 and 8. But that's how that works. There's my little monoprice 5-volt router. I love those because they run right off of the 682 board. I can just take power right off of that, which is really nice. And then I put together little spreadsheets that keep me straight as to how I wire things, and what channels, start channels and end channels. I just bought a cheap cutting board from Walmart, and that's what that backer plate is on these. It's just a cheap 89-cent cutting board. I think I may upgrade this the next year to maybe a cult board or something that can handle more channels, because I do want to put more density in the tree for next year. So again, this tree is about 18 feet tall. Hey, Todd. And it's got a pixel star at the top, 30 pixels in that, and it's 1-inch spacing. The base I made out of just some 2x3s, and I doubled it up for a little more strength. Looking back on it, I probably should have used a little bit more. I welded a crank onto this is a piece of top rail fence post. Actually, I think this is a regular fence post, and the post that slides inside of it is top rail. So that top rail section is 10 feet tall, and this section is about 9. And then I just welded on a pulley at the top. And I'm using 3/32 stainless braided cable. So it's actually a pretty thin cable. There's not a lot of tension on it. And then I staked down all the 4 corner posts with some good concrete stakes into my grass. And then I tension up my little guy wires that come up to the side. This comes up at about 7 feet or so, and this one comes up at about 5. And again, we don't get a lot of weather out here in Arizona, so it's more than enough. We had one tornado come through, which did blow it over, so I had to rebuild it, but that wasn't a big deal. But I think I've got probably maybe $80 in total in the frame for this mega tree. That round piece on the front is just top rail that I put in my vise, and I crimped every 8 inches or so until it formed a radius. Everybody talks about using roller mills and such. I find that if you just crimp it every 8 inches or so, next thing you know, you got an arc. Works out nice. And then I zip tie all my pixel strips down to there, and then at the top they're just hung on with some eye bolts that I opened up a little bit. But that's my mega tree. Over here at the front of my house, I've got a 6x6 P5 panel matrix. The way I made the frame on this is I used probably 1/2 inch by 1.5, and then I double layered it. So I put a frame on the front where the top runs long, and then on the back I ran the side long, and then I just wrapped it in vinyl. I got this vinyl from Joann Fabrics. I think I got like 4 or 5 yards of it for about $20. A lot cheaper than plexi or glass. And then on the back, again, it's wired like up front, where it's got all the ribbon cables coming in one side. Comes into this top one first and then shoots across, so it's 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. It's all run from my main box here. This is where everything is inside this box. This is the Beagle Bone here with the cape on it that runs the matrix. Below that is the show Pi. It's a Pi 3 Plus. You can just kind of barely see it down there. That little blue thing is my USB stick that houses my sequences. These things up front are some power supplies that run everything in here. There's my FM transmitter. It's that CZE brand that you can buy on Amazon for about $70. And then below that is a little LePi 20x2 digital amplifier that runs my speakers. So I get all that housed in a CG 1500 box. Actually, I think this is a CG 1000. I don't even know. And then below that is another box that has 2 5-volt power supplies in it. That's only for the matrix. That's all that's in there, is just the power supplies for the matrix. That is my P5 matrix. The way I attach the panels to the actual frame is I bought some concrete tie, some flat metal that I attached to the end of each of the lines here. So there's a piece of metal running all the way down here, and then it's sandwiched in between these 2 boards. It's kind of hard to see, but I think you can see there's a little silver inside there. So that's how I attach the panels to that strapping, then the strapping to the frame, and then I cement, and then I close it in with the back frame. It makes it very lightweight and very thin. The overall dimensions on this are, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches deep. And then of course the size of a 6x6 panel. I can easily carry it myself. It's It's not that heavy. It's probably 50, maybe 60 pounds. And that's my P5 matrix. On the side of each of my show, I've got these tall palm trees, and I didn't know what to do with the trunks. So in years past, I've wrapped them with C9s, but that got very time consuming. So the last couple of years, I used Buscoyo strips. This is before they came out with that chroma mesh. And I spaced them at 3-inch spacing. So I've got 100 pixel strings, actually goes 50 up, 50 down. And so I end up with, actually no, it's 100 up and 100 down, because it ends up being 1,000. Yeah, because there's 10 strings. So there's 1,000 pixels on this tree, and then on the other side of my yard is another tree, tall palm tree with the exact same thing. Those are run off of a 682 as well, which I'll get to in just a second. All I did here is just put some spacer Buscoyo strips in, so I knew the spacing. It's probably every 40 or so holes I put a spacer in that holds them at the correct spacing. And then they're just basically hung all the way from the top like a big giant curtain. And then I've got some brackets, you know, a third of the way down, and then there's another bracket right here, a third of the way down, that kind of hold it to the tree in the wind. But they're not holding too much weight. The majority of the weight is held all the way from the top. Up in the top of my palm tree is just some palm fronds. I just threw some LEDs, some icicle LEDs on some conduit pipes, and then just hung it up there so it looks like palm fronds. Honestly, I was sick and tired of wrapping the actual fronds themselves and getting stuck all the time, so I decided to make my own, and then I don't have to go up as high either. And then lastly, right above that, you can just barely see it, there's a little tiny box, and inside that box right there, you can just barely see it, that is a little floodlight. So that does shine up into the canopy as well. That adds a nice little effect. So that is my tree matricy. On my second story of my house, I use 2 fence post toppers. So that's that 1¼ inch, I think, fence post. So that post right there is about 20 feet long. And at the top of the post is a little Bethlehem Star that I welded together. And then I put some flat, square pixels on it. And they're spaced about every inch and then held on with zip ties. And that Bethlehem Star has been going strong for the last 6 or 7 years. In this last season, I added a few more pixels to it, so I think it has about 144 pixel density on it. It's about 5 feet tall, about 3 feet wide. And that had to be pretty big to be that high up on the house and actually be an element. So that is my Bethlehem Star, and that is run also down with some wires that go across and come down to that 682 panel, which I will show you next. Running the right side of my house, I've got a few controller boxes here that do different things. First down here is the controller box for a couple extra floodlights that I bought off eBay that I wired to a DMX controller box. So you just pull the power supply out, put it on white with the little remote control, set it to white, run it into the power inputs on the bottom, which are down there. So the majority of the colors all go to the negative, I believe, and then one wire is positive. And then I just ran some pigtails out and ran it directly to the lights. And again, I got 60 watt floods. I got 2 of them for roughly 30 bucks. I am very thrifty. In this box is another one of those DMX SSRs, another 16 channel AC lights. And these run the icicles and the eave board things on the right side of my house, or the north side. And then up here is another 682 with a 5-volt power supply. My whole system on my entire house is all 5 volts. And that, again, these little monoprice, little 10-100 switches are great because they take very little amperage and they run off 5 volts, so they can come right off of the 682 board. I absolutely love those. Those work great. I have them in all my boxes just for simplicity. I can just plug a daisy chain from here directly without having to worry about anything. So that's the other board, and this also runs the matrix. So I've got these last 5 down here are what run the tree matrix on the right hand side of my house. And then these top 6 or 7 plugs up here run the eave boards, which I will get to next. All right, on my house, I've got open eaves, which is really nice. So I went to Home Depot and I bought some of that 1/2 inch or 3/8 inch or whatever it is, melamine particle board. I think it's like paneling board, and it's It's finished with like a wood grain trim on the outside. So I bought a 4x8 sheet of it. I think it was about 20 bucks. And then I had him rip it down to about 5-inch sections. So I ended up with about, I don't know, 20 of them or so. And then from there, I used staples and screws and hangers and attachments, and I hung all my lights onto each of these boards. So this year I've got incandescent icicle lights, are these green ones, and those are soft white. And then I hung some blue and some cool white icicles as well. And then above that, I've got flat square pixels. And then I've got C9 pixels that are covered in a cover. That's the bulb cover right there. And then C7's next to that. The last thing I got are some floodlight blinder lights, which is out here on the end, which is just that little bulb right there. It's just a regular socket, Edison-based socket. And that's just a little like $2 bulb from Alibaba from Reiru. And I've had those for numerous years. I've had those for about 10 years now. And they work just fine. Yeah, they get wet and they've never shorted out, and then they just dry out in the sun. So each one of these boards are about 8 feet long. Some are a little shorter just based on the length of my eave. And then right where they cross to each other, I wired in these Molex plugs. So I basically can pull all my eave boards down, which I have about 30 of them. I can pull them down in about an hour and a half at most. I just go up with my drill gun on a ladder and pull those Molex plugs apart, and then each section comes down. I just hand it to my daughter, and then she brings it in the house. So that's how I run my eaves. I put all my stuff on boards, and then I hang the boards every year with just a couple screws. It makes it nice and easy. The pixels come up on this side, they run down on the flat pixels, and then they come back on the C9s. That's how I wired them. I did that because I didn't think I was going to be hanging any props or needing any props to be coming off of the eave boards. Looking back on it now, I'll get to it in a second, but I probably should have wired in some pigtails in the middle where I could jump in and grab the data signal so I could run props. Like if I hung a star or a snowflake right here, I could just plug it into the eave board right here. Now, the way I have it wired, I have to run a whole separate wire, which I will probably redo for next year. But those are my eave boards. This particular eave section is about 60 pixels long, so that's 120 total, I think. I may be wrong, might be 50. So I inject power at the end. So I bring up a power injection up with the string. I use 4 wire extensions, and the last wire is just extra power. So I'll bring that extra power wire all the way along the eave board, and then I'll connect it over at this end. So on my eave boards, I only inject power. I don't inject ground. I use the common ground for everything, and that's worked great for the last, again, 10 years. So that is my eave boards. The other side of my, over here is where the show computer and the Beagle Bone and everything is here. On this other side is my main 682 board that I got. This has always been my show runner. This runs the left side of my house, and it also runs the matrix on the tree right in front of it, which is over by my driveway. And this also does the DMX. So coming out of this 4th port down here, I wired in just a regular cat. Actually, there's 2 of them. The red one goes to the left, and the blue one comes out here and goes to the right and runs all my DMX stuff to the different sides of my yard. So everything in my system is wired. I don't do anything wireless. I don't want any lagging or any issues. Inside is my show router. Just an old Belkin. The thing's like 12 years old at least. Another one of those monoprice switches. And then that's how I distribute all the data across my network. So that's my main controller. Over here's another little SSR. I think I've got 17 of these in the show. They're all over the place doing all my incandescent stuff. To do the LED lights up in the palm trees, up in the palm fronds, here's another one of them. And the way I run them, some people might disagree with me, but I've done this and it's worked great. I use landscape wire. I try to find the cheapest way to do stuff, guys. This is just the way I roll. So I use landscape wire, and every colored wire is a positive. And then the black wire here is the only neutral. So up at the top, I've got it wired with 6 female end that run all of my colors: red, green, blue, white, violet, orange. And then I use the black wire for the one common neutral. So I wire all of them together at the top up there. It just made sense to me because all the traces on the back of this board are all common anyway, so why couldn't I run one common ground or one common neutral? And it works great. I've been doing my whole show this way. So again, here's one neutral here, which is the white wire, and this green, red, yellow, blue those are all positive, and then the same over here. The neutral is the white, and then the color wires are all positive. And that works great. That runs all my canopy up here, and then it also runs the icicles, the new ice-colored, cool white icicles, and the blue ones I bought for this year. So that's how that works. And then just use extension wire. I find the cheapest wire I can find. This is thermostat wire. You can buy a 500-foot spool of it for like 40 bucks from Home Depot. And like I said, it's 5 conductor. And then this is irrigation wire, which has a little thicker jacket on it, which is kind of nice. This is solid wire. It's not stranded, so it doesn't bend very well. But once you get it locked in and you get a little strain relief on it, it works really well. And it's the cheapest wire you can find, and it's got a good rating on it. So that's this side of my house. Last couple of some of the other effects I've got on my house. That is what I call a multiface. That is a 4x8 roughly sheet of MDF that I drilled about 600 holes in. I drew a picture of what I thought a Santa face overlaid with an elf face overlaid with a Frosty the Snowman face and all such, and then it also turns out to be a pretty good like narrator or female singer face. And I just overlaid them on my little draw program on my computer, and then I put it on my projector and projected it onto this board and drew it out. And that's what I ended up with. So I got the beard of a Santa, I got the collar of an elf, I got a whole face with a whole bunch of different mouth movement areas. I got a nose, I got some eyes that blink, I got different ears, I got round ears and elf ears that are pointy. I've got all those different things on that face, including up at the top, I've got a stocking cap, or I've got a top cap, top hat, or I can use the very, very top as a halo for like a female singer. So the way this works, and again, using the power of X-Lights with the custom model, I can put all the pixels in, and I just punched them in from the back in no particular order, just as long as I could punch my 3-inch spacing pixels through the back so that they would reach. So some of them are staggered. I might go, you know, odd ones all the way around, then come back on the even to fill them in. But whatever, I just filled 600 or so pixels onto that face, and then I programmed it through X-Lights. And it turns out to be one of the stars of the show, so to speak. So I can fire that top halo section, I can fire the hat, I can make that stocking cap. I like to let the tassel at the end of the stocking cap be multiple colors and just kind of flicker. The eyes, I've got eyebrows and eyelids, and then in the mouth I've got multiple mouth movements available. And then of course I've got the elf. These points are the elf collar, but if I only fire this, if I don't fire this last point and I bring a little bit of beard in, it looks like shoulders, so it looks like somebody just standing there with a shirt on, which works out nice. Last couple years ago, I added these little wisps coming out the side for like female hair, and that works out nice. So when Celine Dion sings "Oh Holy Night," she can be singing it. And that is what I call my multi-face. And on the back of that is another 682 board that runs that entire 800 pixel prop. Next to it are 291 pixel custom-made snowflakes that I welded together. And the way I wired them is pretty simple. I started at one point and I wired out in skipped spots, skipped holes. So I'd wire out, then wire up the arm, and then I'd come back through the holes, so everything's like staggered. So I'm wiring down this as 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and then I go all the way around the prop, and then as I come my way back, it's the last, 128, 129, 130, and 131, fill in the hole as I fill up. And I found that works the greatest. Then doing 5-volt pixels, I just go into the middle here, anywhere near the middle, and I grab a wire that's either coming or going. It doesn't really matter, because there's about 50 pixels on each arm, something like that, 30 pixels. And then I just inject power at the hub. So I take a small little junction box, little metal thing that I use to bring all the positives together and then all the negatives together, and then I wire that into some pixel injection right here in the middle. so that the power and data come in from the top, and then I get a couple extension wires that come down to that pixel injection point, and then that injects the entire snowflake. So that's how I make my snowflakes. So there are two there, like I said, about 131 or 100, yeah, I think something like that, 151, I don't know, pixels on each of those. And then I'll show you the other ones on the front of the house. This is my biggest snowflake of the season. This is the one that is about 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide. And it has the same kind of wiring. I bring the wiring in from the bottom. You can see the wire coming in from the bottom here. And then it starts here, and it goes 1, 3, and then it shoots out this arm, and then it comes back in the holes, then it goes out this arm, comes back through the middle holes, and so that filled that up. And then I come up a little bit and go out this arm and out this arm and then back, and I just keep working my way up all the way around the snowflake until I work my way back, and then I fill in the holes that I skipped, and then I end down here at the bottom. That particular snowflake has 313 pixels on it, I believe. And again, thank you X-Lights for custom modeling. I wouldn't be able to wire it that way. In the middle, again, I just pull any, like every, not this arm, but maybe the 9 o'clock arm, the 12 o'clock arm, and the 3 o'clock arm. I pull the power and ground off that, and then wire that into a wiring block, and that's how I do my pixel injection. So I think on this one, I think I'm using a 5 conductor, so I think I'm bringing up 2 power, 1 ground, or 2 power, 2 ground, and a data. I think that's what I'm bringing up there. So that's what's wiring that snowflake. Last 2 snowflakes of this house. There's one right there. That's a custom-made, welded-up snowflake. And the last one you really can't see from here, but it's way in the back of the house. You can only see half of it with the roof line. But when you're out in the cul-de-sac, you can see it. Those are the last 2. That one in the back there is very similar. That one back there is very similar to the ones that flank the Megaface or the Multiface. And there's my Bethlehem Star right above it. Those were a nice addition this year that added some nice washes across the house. Everybody always asks me how I power this show. So up under my eave, this is up near the front of my house, near where the boards are. Up under the eave there, I mounted a little sub box, and that has got 4 double gang 15 amp breakers. Coming into that box is some 1.0 cable. It's just those 2 wires right there. So that handles, I think, what is it, 60 amps per cable. And then I've got those red wires are my return lines, so I'm using a much thinner gauge as my return, assuming that the power is going to be going into the panel and the return lines are only there to complete the circuit. I'm running them through some Anderson plugs. That bigger plug section I think is rated at 120 amps, and the smaller ones I think are rated at like 40. And that allows me to quick disconnect the system from the electrical box. So I can go to my electrical box, which is way over on the other side of the house over there. You can see the white wire coming down, and that just plugs in underneath the electrical box for temporary. So I just flip those breakers off, disconnect the wires, and then I can pull this white wire down. So that white wire is temporary. That's only to power the system for the season. And then I can go all the way up and then disconnect those 2 Anderson plugs, and then it comes down. And then I leave that box up there all season long. And from that box, from each of those double 15 amp breakers, which again, I can zoom right in there and show, there's double 15 amps on there. I break 2 of those breakers off to a sub box that's right there just past my security camera. And then there's another 2 that break off to another sub box down the eave a little bit further, another one there. So I've got 8 15 amp circuits that I use to run the entire show. And I just pull extension cords down from those eaves, just bring them down behind my panel or whatever. And then those are the plugs that come down to wire and run the whole show.